The Debrief is a production of faculty affiliated with the National Security Affairs Department at the U.S. Naval War College. The views presented here are those of the speakers and do not reflect the positions of the Department of Defense, the United States government, or any of its components. Welcome to the Debrief, where we deconstruct defense, diplomacy, and developments in national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. I'm your co-host, Theo Milanopoulos. The U.S. Department of Commerce has played an increasingly important role in shaping the U.S. national and economic security environment in an era of strategic competition. Earlier this year, the Naval War College hosted the Honorable Don Graves, who served as the 19th Deputy Secretary of Commerce, to discuss these developments. He spoke before a live audience in conversation with Dr. Arup Mukherjee, Assistant Professor of National Security Affairs at the U.S. Naval War College and former Senior Advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Commerce from 2022 to 2024.
Hello, my name is Arup Mukherjee. I'm an Assistant Professor here in the National Security Affairs Department, and I'm also the proud FPA Professor of Seminar 12. Which last I checked, I think is the #1 ranked NSDM seminar in the history of the world. But I'm not here to talk about Seminar 12. Of course, I could talk about Seminar 12 for many, many hours, the great minds, the great personalities. We are here to welcome Don Graves, the Honorable Don Graves, who served as the 19th Deputy Secretary of Commerce from 2021 to 2025. And let me just say, as a historian, I should know, and I don't, the last time a serving or former Deputy Secretary of Commerce visited the Naval War College to discuss national security issues, and my somewhat educated guess, is that it has not happened, or if it has happened, it is an exceedingly rare treat. And make no mistake, this is a rare and sweet treat. As all of you in the audience will know from the FPA subcourse, Deputy Secretaries are often the COOs, the Chief Operating Officers of entire departments. Deputy Secretary Graves oversaw commerce at a moment of immense change. Unlike other departments that may have multiple Deputy Secretaries, Commerce just has the one. And Deputy Secretary Graves therefore also played an outward policy leadership role on several issues, including national security. A former Deputy Secretary of Defense, let me just say, a former Deputy Secretary of Defense once told me that the Department of Commerce was the tip of the spear on national security issues. And during the Biden administration, we ran the numbers. There was a significant increase in the number of invitations to NSC, National Security Council meetings at the deputies and principals at the DC and PC level. In other words, as you will know from FPA, that means that Commerce was called to the table at the absolute highest level of decision-making on national security issues more frequently and more intensely than anyone could ever remember, both in the department and outside of the department. So if you want to get a handle on national security issues in 2025, with the challenges that you've read about in national strategies and other coursework, you cannot do so. You just cannot without some understanding, some engagement with economics issues, in both domestic and international. And of course, we'll talk more about what that means, what that is. And Deputy Secretary Graves, of course, was not just there witnessing this change unfold, he was steering it. So he saw a lot, he did a lot, and he has lots to talk to us about. So that's why we're here, not Seminar 12, although we love you. I should also say Deputy Secretary Graves has served in multiple capacities in government. During the Obama-Biden administration, he was the then Vice President Biden's counselor and domestic and economic policy director. He ran the Cancer Moonshot Task Force. He was the executive director of President Obama's Jobs Council. He led the federal government's efforts on Detroit recovery and was a deputy assistant secretary at Treasury, and previously in the Clinton administration was a policy advisor at the Treasury Department. I had the distinct pleasure of serving in Deputy Secretary Graves' office at Commerce, where I developed my deep and abiding love of bureaucracy and organizational process, and had a ringside seat to this exciting work. And I owe a lot of that to the inherent substance and the times we live in, but frankly, I owe more of that to the fact that I got to work under the gentleman to my left, hands down one of my favorite people in the world. So without further ado, let's please give a warm welcome to Deputy Secretary Graves. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Hello.
All right, so let's start with the basics. Why should anybody care about economics? Who cares?
That's a really great question. Well, I mean, we all have to eat. We all have to pay for things. It's the way that things work around here. You have to come up with some means of trade. You trade dollars, currency, for some good. Our systems work that way. Why is it important now? Because you can't make things, you can't do things without operating within an economy, without operating in and utilizing the systems of economics that make our country succeed. And they're changing significantly. The world is moving faster and faster. You all know this. And economics is directly tied to science and technologies, directly tied to the way that the world operates. So if you don't at least have some basic knowledge of economics, it's hard to operate in the rest of the world. You certainly are not as likely to make money if you don't know it. But I think it's a particularly interesting time because of the way that our economic systems across countries and across the globe are evolving. So I'll stop there, but I'm sure you're going to want to get into.
So it's a
more
big,
of it.
obviously, it's a big, meaty topic. Where does the Commerce Department figures into the equation exactly how?
So, how many of you know what the Commerce Department is or does? Just a show of hands. A few folks do.
That's pretty good.
That's actually
Better than
great.
what we were expecting.
There are 13 different components of the broad components of the Department of Commerce, our bureaus. Nowhere near the size of the Department of Defense. Only about 50,000 employees at the Department of Commerce. But it ranges in the things that they do. Basically, if you live, if you have families, if you buy things, if you breathe air, if you travel, you're going to have some reason to interact with the Department of Commerce, or it happens without you even knowing about it. So the department, as I said, 13 different components. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but it includes the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, which includes the National Weather Service and, importantly, the Office of Space Commerce. National Institutes of Standards and Technology, the world's premier standards development body, also leads things like manufacturing, investment and development in this country. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office protects our intellectual property. The Bureau of Economic Analysis and the Census Bureaus, which are the premier agencies at evaluating our economy and keeping track of everything related to our people. Of course, means our population, but a whole range of other things. Economic Development Administration, International Trade Administration, the list goes on and on, but you get a sense of what commerce is. Some would say that it's a hodgepodge, that people just sort of threw things together and it doesn't have coherence. I actually think of the Department of Commerce as America's hall closet, because when you really need something, you're either going to go to your junk drawer or your hall closet, and you're likely going to find it. So the Department of Commerce has all the things that you need to be able to succeed for your economy and to ensure that commerce flows across the globe. So it's a department that touches just about every part of life. Importantly, we're recognizing that it's a set of tools that can be used effectively to prosecute national security, to ensure that our economic statecraft gains purchase around the world, that if we use these tools effectively, we can continue to drive U.S. policy and strategy outward and have a direct impact on the rest of the world. It's not just about here in the U.S. domestically.
I've also heard you refer to the Department of Commerce, the Department of Data,
Yes.
Technology, Trade, Business Analysis, Trade Analysis.
More scientists than any other part of the federal government,
Right.
more data than any other part, than any other place in the entire world. Literally, more data controlled and produced that's publicly available than any other entity around the world.
Yes, and that also includes private data. Sorry, that's the public data. There's also, of course, a host of private data, industry analysis, and proprietary data within the department. Okay, let's combine that with the national security equation. So what, and maybe if you wouldn't mind sort of telling us a story of that, maybe the course of your time in the last administration, but how those data, tech, trade, et cetera, how that relates to what folks in the audience right now have been reading about and thinking with respect to national security.
It's a great question, and there are a lot of different stories. I'll try and pick out some anecdotes that may make sense. I'll start with something that we talked about with a group a little earlier this morning. We all know about the continued invasion of Ukraine by Russia just a few short years ago. Leading up to that, there was a recognition that the signs were all pointing towards this continued invasion, that there was troops were amassing, equipment was poised. There were signals intelligence suggesting that something was going to happen. As a customer of the President's Daily Briefing, the PDB, I would get the PDB generally about 3 or 4 times a week, occasionally 5 times a week. Just so folks know, secretaries are the ones who are often outward-facing, as Arup suggested. They're the ones who are on TV a lot. Deputies are the ones who go to the deputies level meetings, as well as some principals level meetings. So I was going to, for every principals level meeting that the NSC would hold, PC, there would be generally 5 or so DCs, maybe up to 10 DCs. So a lot of meetings that I would have to attend. So I was actually much more involved in national security conversations than the secretary was. So I was just constantly getting doing my morning PDB briefing before the day would start. So I was seeing some of the signs that were pointing to this invasion. But it wasn't really until around Thanksgiving, just a few months ahead of the invasion, that the NSC said, I actually got a call from one of the deputies over there who said, "Don, I'm sorry about this, but we didn't realize that you had some tools that might be useful for what we see coming. Can you come to this meeting? We've been having these meetings about something." You wouldn't tell me over the phone, but we've been having some meetings. Can you come to this meeting? So I showed up, and it was the entire National Security Council at the deputies level. And I got brought up to speed, and they were preparing for the eventual invasion. And they had all the tools. They were ready with the supportive material and things like that. But they'd been thinking about sanctions. And they hadn't recognized that there's a difference between sanctions and export controls. Sanctions are typically imposed by Treasury. There's other sanctions, State Department and other components can impose sanctions. But they are broad-based, and they are more targeted at things like currency transfers and the flows of things like oil. Export controls are very targeted. They can be used to stop the flow of a certain product. In this case, it was technologies, microelectronics. Because we have these unbelievable tools, including the Foreign Direct Product Rule, FDPR, which basically says any product, any technology, any intellectual property that has been developed here, so anything that we produce from our brains to actual products, excuse me, we can tell other countries, you cannot ship it, you cannot trade, you cannot sell those products if you don't do X, Y, and Z, or we won't send you more of those products. So we called that our nuclear option, the FDPR, basically cutting off a country's ability to utilize a technology. We now had the ability to use that on Russia. So over the course of months, we developed a set of export control approaches to our technologies falling into the hands of Putin's military and industrial development. The challenge, though, is that our economies, there's a huge misalignment. We buy almost nothing from Russia. They buy or bought very little directly from us because they were trying to separate their economy. They got a lot of our products from our partners and allies and others from around the world. So we then had to put together a plan for how we prevented those products, those microelectronics, from getting into Russia. The only way to do that is to partner with our partners and allies. We couldn't do it alone. We could certainly go to our nuclear option, but that would have, other countries really dislike when we unilaterally impose those types of export controls and prevent them from trading technologies. So we worked out deals with 37 other partners. It ended up being 39 over time. But 37 partners around the world, the EU members, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand to some extent, Korea, Japan, etc. And we were able to contain Russia's ability to get microelectronics. So that's an example of when our economic security, our economic might, and the tools that we had at Commerce could be used, I think, fairly effectively to prevent certain types of trade from going on. And we did it really, really well, despite the fact that Russia still was able to get microelectronics. I mean, they have decades worth of inventory from around the world. So it's tough to stop it entirely, but we stopped a lot of it. Another anecdote is, and it's actually related to Russia, the International Telecommunications Union, which is one of the subcomponents of the UN. And they make the rules that relate to telecommunications issues. Information telecom is the big one of the big areas of economic growth, technological advancement. The UN body, the ITU, sets the rules for who is driving the standards, what type of technologies are being utilized around the world. The PRC and Russia got together, and every 4 years there's a new Secretary General of the ITU. They put forth a candidate, a Russian candidate, who actually had been a senior executive at Huawei. So it's like a perfect storm of folks someone that we wouldn't want as a Secretary General. We had our candidate, who would have been the very first woman SecGen at the ITU, trained at Commerce, was a leader in the private sector, and those are the two main candidates. So we actually, working with the State Department, I led a delegation to the ITU, and we partnered with Department of Defense and Department of Energy. We had a whole-out blitz to work with our partners and allies to get our candidate elected as Secretary General. I actually got to stand on stage and give the speech at that assembly, calling out the Russians for their invasion of Ukraine, but also talking about why it's important to have rules of the road, why it's important to stand behind democratic values and principles and protect intellectual property and other rights. We won the day going away. It was a blowout. It was a lot bigger electoral victory than folks had expected. That because the NTIA, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is the president's telecommunications advisor, is at Commerce. We got to lead that effort, but it's focused on national security, on economic security, and American leadership around the world. It made sure that developing countries, because of that victory, developing countries are going to have more access and openness to things like the internet, are going to have buy more technology from the United States. So it was a huge victory, but it's because we utilized all the tools that we had at the Department of Commerce, working in concert with our partners and allies. Sorry, maybe that went too far afield.
No, it's good. I will build off. So why, economic security on the one hand feels like an old concept, on the other hand it feels like people are talking about it a lot more. Mm-hmm. I think the question is why? And why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult? Is it more complex? Is it more complicated? Has it always been this complex? Has it always been this complicated? Are there new trends that make it even more so? What's your read of the situation?
How much time do we have?
I'll
give the very abbreviated version of my opinion. The world has changed significantly. The rise of critical and emerging technology, semiconductors, AI, quantum, biotech, clean tech, advanced manufacturing, the list goes on. There's actually the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House puts out a list. I think it's like 20, it changes depending on how you look at it, but it's about 20 or so technologies. Those technologies are developing faster than anyone could have predicted. You look at all the futurists, they would have said, yeah, we're moving rapidly, but it's moving so much more quickly than they would have said even a decade ago. So the development of and utilization of AI, which the National Institutes of Standards and Technology has been a part of AI and quantum development for basically 100 years. And you would say, well, 100 years, how is that possible? But all the precursors to today's technologies are based off of what we did in partnership with DARPA, DOD, DOE, our national laboratories. So that is accelerating exponentially. At the same time, and we talked a little bit about this earlier this morning, we made a miscalculation here in the US around the rise and strength of the PRC and its economy. We made a miscalculation around the ability of some developing countries around the world to advance rapidly. We thought opening our markets was going to be a recipe for US domination, and that our democratic values and our capitalist democracy would proliferate around the world. That didn't happen, obviously. They took the pieces that they wanted and disregarded the rest. And the PRC, because they are a command economy, has the ability to do things that we can't, we wouldn't, and we shouldn't. They can place long-term bets that we just can't. You know, you go to any province, and you will see that Xi has made a bet. He said, "This is where we're going to develop this particular technology, and we're going to build laboratories and factories to build those technologies." Yes, they have small businesses that are innovating, but it's really based on their massive investments. They will make billions or trillions of dollars worth of investment in technologies like they have in semiconductors. At the same time, they will engage in intellectual property theft. It's just outright theft, the likes of which none of us, we knew it was going on, but I don't think that we understood the sophistication that's been involved. So between those two, the game has changed entirely. So during the last administration, we were very focused on ways that we could stay ahead of the PRC in those areas where we had a lead. So part of it was protecting and preventing the PRC and other malign actors from getting access to our technologies where we could. It's also investment. So investing in those spaces where market forces don't align, where there's inefficiencies, where the private sector just doesn't have the ability to make sometimes really huge investments in certain critical and emerging technologies. And then the third piece of it was making sure that the marketplace worked through the way that we wanted. And I keep this card with me. I learned this from Joe Biden. He always keeps a certain card to remind himself of certain things. Mine talks about the foundations of a prosperous and equitable world economic order. Shared democratic values, adherence to the rule of law, protection of worker rights, protection of intellectual property, pioneering international standards driven by our country, creative capital markets that can take risks alongside innovators, and then government investment to take the early risk when absolutely necessary. Those are the building blocks of this world economic order that has worked for the United States for many, many decades. At the bottom of that, I have three words, though, that are absolutely essential, and it's what I think has allowed us to succeed even more: transparency, clarity, and predictability. When you're transparent, when you're predictable, and you have clarity of vision and principle, everyone knows what to do. CEOs can make investments for the long run. They can say, oh, we're going to make a 10-year bet on something because we know that the rules of the road aren't going to change, and that the United States has our back, that they're going to go around the world and protect us and protect our innovations. It's why the U.S. has consistently been the largest recipient of foreign direct investment. What that means is that if you have a Department of Defense that is reliant on a private sector that is innovating, is reliant on partners around the world who will supply us with components that we need, it means that we know exactly what the rules are going to be for the foreseeable future. It means that we know that we're going to have a supply chain that works for us, that allows U.S. companies to partner with others around the world to invest, bring jobs here, but also make sure that you don't have engagements, kinetic engagements happening around the world as much as they might, because their economies are succeeding as well, and their people see a path forward, a future that is better than if they were to go to war over resources, et cetera. So for us, economic statecraft tied directly into national security for the United States.
All right, I want to transition a bit to, I feel like the conversation so far has been much more, a little bit more outward looking, more IS and kind of orientation, put it in the vocabulary of students. And I want to actually bring it to FPA, the foreign policy analysis, something more internally focused with respect to the bureaucracy. And by the way, I think I should mention we're going to have quite a bit of time toward the end of this for Q&A. So folks should hopefully start to think through any follow-up questions or anything that's on your mind, and you'll certainly have an opportunity to ask. So, as the chief operating officer of the department, given that a lot of so much about transition can be internal facing or internally facing, getting the bureaucracy essentially to align with priorities or a shifting landscape or a shifting strategy of some sort. What was that kind of steering? What did that look like? Were there challenges? Were there rewards? How did you see it? How did you think about it?
I mean, every department has their challenges. I would say, and I know there are, I will not have much backup here other than the person sitting up on the stage with me, but the Department of Commerce, in my view, is the single best and single most important department in the U.S. Government. And that's because of the tools that we have, there's no other department that touches every single part of things that Americans deal with than the Department of Commerce. The only other place, I think, is the White House. We touch everything. I spent more time in meetings at the White House on domestic, economic, and national security issues, I think, than any other deputy, just because we cross-cut everything. And our teams. So we have Nobel Prize-winning scientists. We have scientists who are at the cutting edge of every technology under the sun. We have weather forecasters who and PhDs in climate development who can help us be much more predictable about things like where balloons are going to be floating across the country, regardless of where they're from.
It could be from anywhere.
It could be from anywhere,
right.
And any type of balloon. We also had folks who were thinking about the ways that you align the three things that I talked about: the protection, the promotion, and the market-facing components, the world market-facing components. But trying to put all those pieces together, it hadn't really been done before. Up until 9 months ago, 6 months ago, there had never been a national security strategy for the entire Department of Commerce. Like, no one had thought about it. And the way that we're structured, those 13 different components that I talked about, there's only a handful of people who look at the breadth of the entire Department of Commerce. The secretary and myself, and then a handful of others on the staff. So that meant that one of the first meetings that I had, actually, it was shocking. So I was having these national security briefings that our national security office was coordinating for me, we had a meeting to talk about quantum computing, quantum information science. This was, I think it was probably June of the first year of the Biden administration. So very early on, relatively. And I had folks from NIST, NOAA, NTIA.
These are all bureaus of the Commerce Department, just FYI.
The bureaus that I was talking about. So National Institute of Standards and Technology, NOAA, which I think everyone here knows, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and there was one more bureau, Bureau of Industry and Security. And they were briefing, we had one briefer from NIST who was talking about quantum. And as the briefing was going on, the folks that were in the room said, wait, you do that? We do that too. And it was the first time that folks who were in the same department actually had met and shared information about things that they were working on. And so it told me that we need a different approach. So early on, we actually created this critical and emerging technology group that I chaired that brought together the heads of all of the different relevant bureaus to look at the development of critical and emerging technology. So those are the types of challenges as a deputy secretary you have to think about is like, you see everything, but not everyone sees everything. And you have really fantastic people, but unless they're exposed to what else is going on, they're in their silos. There's no way that they're gonna be able to see what's going on, even if they really want to, because the system doesn't work that way. So we really tried to break down some of those barriers and create more opportunities for sharing and collaboration across the department. We also created what we call, so I said the Office of Science of Space Commerce is part of NOAA. I had it sort of lifted up and reporting into me, and we created this thing called CSIC, which is funny if you're a NOAA person or a Navy person. But it was the Commerce Space Coordinating Committee, and it was the first time that we actually had all the bureaus coming together to talk about space and commercial development of space, because we know that that's the next frontier of commercial development, and we need to have a strategy to deal with what we were seeing from the Chinese, the Russians, and other countries. That's the thing that sort of kept me up at night, is what am I missing? Like, what's going to happen? You get those 3 a.m. phone calls. We need you to get into a skiff. There's something happening. And what didn't I do to prepare? What wasn't the team ready to engage on? Did our team have our regular enough set of meetings to plan for any sort of foreseeable outcome? Did we talk with another department frequently enough to know that something was going to happen, and they knew that they could count on us? Those were the struggles. I will say, though, that I had more fun learning. It's the greatest gig. If you can ever become a deputy secretary, definitely take it. You learn so much. You work with unbelievable people. My job was to be a cheerleader, to bring people together, to share information. Most importantly, it was to get out of the way. Once they had clear directions, strategic vision, it's to know that I'm not the one who is going to have the most information about any topic. I mean, almost literally, I knew less than anyone who was in the room. I was never the smartest person in the room. I knew that. I'm comfortable with that. I know that that's the case today. But I could see everything. And I knew what the president, his vision was, so I could execute on that vision and enable people to do what they needed to do.
I had a funny interaction with, to your first point about silos. I was I was giving a briefing at PTO, the Patent Trademark Office, and PTO is located not at the main, so the headquarters of the Commerce Department is right across the street from Treasury and the White House. And Patent and Trademark Office has its headquarters a little bit of a drive away in Alexandria. And I showed up in the lobby, and the person who was meeting me asked me if I was from Commerce. And I was like,
We're
so
all
are
from
you.
Commerce.
Yeah, so are you. But just to like kind of capture this feeling of folks who that federated kind of element, or the sort of these sort of silos, to some degree maybe because they were geographically distanced. In any event, commerce wasn't always so that's the internal bureaucracy. Essentially saying, you want people to interact, make sure there's communication, driving vision if there isn't vision, and if there is vision, getting out of the way, as you said. What about other departments? Commerce wasn't always invited to the big kids table that way on national security issues, and specifically the National Security Council. What did that look like? What were the kind of growing pains there, integrating within the interagency environment?
That took a lot of work. Commerce, during the Obama administration, Commerce was rarely included in National Security Council meetings, in national security discussions. You'd have one bureau that had an issue or had a tool, and so they would get invited. But Commerce, by and large, didn't go to National Security Council meetings. That started to change in the first Trump administration, particularly when they were dealing with Huawei and other technologies. Commerce started to show up. Beginning of the Obama administration was really the point at which everything changed.
You mean Biden administration? Sorry, yeah.
Biden administration. Everything changed. It's the problem when you're serving 3 administrations. I started getting invited to meetings. Early on, in fact, I got invited to a space, a meeting on some things that were happening in space, and I can't talk about what was going on, but I will tell you it was the first time that Commerce had been invited to this particular set of meetings that was going on a regular basis. It was a number of generals and admirals from DOD. It was NASA, and it was NSC, and all of a sudden Commerce showed up, and none of them knew who I was. I was brand new, so they didn't quite know what to do with me. They didn't know that actually there really was this thing called the Office of Space Commerce, or even if they did know about it, they didn't know what it did. The fact that we operate the civilian satellite fleet for the U.S. government, that we're the ones who essentially oversee commercial space development and are the regulatory authority on a lot of the launches, non-human crewed launches. So I started showing up in meetings, and as the White House and other departments realized that we had these tools, particularly as it tied into economic security issues, I kept getting invited to meetings. And so, to your point, Arup, the number of meetings that we were invited to at the NSC increased. It really was exponential growth. I ended up, basically I could have gone to a meeting, not just a meeting, but several meetings every single day of the week at the NSC. You just can't do that if you're also operating a big bureaucracy. So things changed because of the rapid technological development. I was meeting frequently with my counterpart at DOD, Kath Hicks, who's a dear friend. I didn't know her beforehand, but we became close because we were spending so much time together in these meetings. The good thing about Commerce is that because we were the newcomers, you had the entrenched interests. You had state versus DOD in a lot of time, and then Treasury, and everyone was sort of vying for their own interests, and so there was constant sort of horse trading behind the scenes, where people were saying, vote for, if you were in a deputies meeting, will you vote for this? I need you to help me, and I'll scratch your back on this other thing. Or in this thing called the CFIUS, the Council on Foreign Investment in the U.S. That was another place where a lot of this happened. We were more of the newcomer in a lot of these things, so we ended up being the ones who brokered a lot of deals to try and, because we're the ones who are actually very practically oriented, because we also touch the business community most. We're trying to get things done so that the business community can be unlocked and unleashed and do what they do, which is innovate and drive economic growth. So I was constantly doing shuttle diplomacy, not internationally, but between the different departments trying to get things done. So that was, it was a fun role in some respects. Yeah. And then I kept getting invited on international trips. So I was the first senior official to go to KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, early on for Davos in the desert. And it was sort of shocking, I think, for a lot of folks that commerce was the one being deployed internationally on national security issues. I met with the National Security Advisor of UAE early on, and the National Security Advisor of the Saudis. So people would say, why are you meeting with these folks? We did all the export control work on Russia, so and had coordinated things with our European allies. They didn't have the rules, the laws in place that we had, so we had to help them stand it up. I actually had one of my teammates deployed in Europe for weeks at a time, helping them build their systems. It was a change in the way that they looked at the United States, such that I was there for some meetings with the EU thinking about the PRC, and meeting with the chief of staff to the president, and he got a call, like we were down in the bowels in a skiff in the EU, in their office building, and he got this message that he had to go and take a call. He got a call and he said, Don, we have to stop the meeting for a minute. I need you and Matt Borman, who was the expert on export controls, I need you to come with me. We went up with security. They took us all the way up to the top floor, where we were met by Ursula von der Leyen, president of the EU. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't usually meet presidents of other countries. I know our presidents, but it wasn't something that was often done, and certainly isn't something that Commerce deputy secretaries had happen almost ever. But she knew and recognized the value of the economic security tools that we had and the work that we were doing to help build this coalition. So she wanted to meet with us and talk about strategy going forward. That became much more the norm in this administration. Angolan president, when he came over for the U.S.-Africa summit, for instance, his last meeting, he had meetings with Secretary Blinken, obviously with the president, with a few other cabinet members, but the last meeting that he wanted to do, he said, I need to meet with Don Graves. It's like, why would the Angolan president want to meet with me? It's because he knew that commerce unlocked a huge set of opportunities for them. Yes, it was economic growth, but also he knew that none of that economic growth could happen unless there were national security guardrails in place. So we wanted to talk about how they put in their guardrails to protect national security at the same time that we were looking to invest and partner with them on the economic side.
I want to linger a little bit on this. You sort of mentioned a little bit about an emergency call, going to a skiff. I want to hear a little more juice. You're here for the juicy details.
Yeah.
Like, what was going to the Situation Room like? Did it ever get old? Without, of course, getting into anything sensitive here, but
right.
Give us a little bit more of that.
the first time I went to the sit room was in the Obama administration, and I had not been on the national security side at all in my career. I had done economic policy issues, domestic policy issues. I'd worked in the private sector, but in banking. That was generally the type of work that I did. And when I became the counselor to then Vice President Biden, and then I became his traveling chief of staff, they said, well, you're going to get read into a number of things. And so then I started showing up in these meetings, backbenching, sitting on the side, but just getting steeped in the sit room. So it was an experience for me to go to the sit room for the first time and not having any depth of understanding of what I was in for, but, probably easier to sort of get thrown in the deep end and you either sink or swim. So that was actually really useful. But the sit room is a fascinating place. Has anyone here ever been to the sit room? So you know how small it is. And by the sit room, I mean there's multiple rooms in the sit room, but it is a tiny place, and national security staff is tiny. So you get in this room, and you sort of feel the weight of the White House and the administration when you walk in. It's sort of awe-inspiring because this thing that you've seen in TV, and it's up until recently, it was much, much nicer in the movies than it really was in reality. The room was, it felt like the furniture was old and breaking down. The technology didn't always seem to work the way that it should. There's a gleaming sit room now. But you felt the weight of everything when you're sitting around a table, and it's folks like C.Q. Brown sitting there across the table from you, the director of the CIA or deputy director of the CIA, when you have the chief of staff or the vice president or the president walk into the room, and you're like, oh, crap, this is real. And so, I mean, you all get it, but you have to sort of pinch yourself when you're in there the first few times. Actually, I had to do it every time that I went in, because how often are you going to get to be in these rooms? But then you're thinking, oh, I'm involved in the policymaking decision process, and the things that I say are actually going to have an impact, not just on a discussion, but on a policy that's decided on that will impact perhaps billions of people around the world. So it made me, I think, a more cautious person in a good respect. I know I drove folks like Arup crazy because I wanted to do more preparation. Every night I had a briefing book that was literally this thick, so that I could go into these meetings and know what the heck I was going to say. I will tell you that there were a number of these sessions that were sort of jaw-dropping, or the moments where you realize that things are hitting the fan, and like you plan for it, but until you're there at the moment, the reality doesn't really hit. And so I told you about the preparations for the continued invasion in Ukraine by Russia. We knew it was getting closer in the days leading up. I won't go into the classified details, but I will tell you that I actually was not in the sit room the night that it happened. I was actually traveling. I was in Atlanta, of all places. Was doing some meetings, and I had just sat down to dinner with the CEO of Siemens. And, it was a great conversation started, and I got word, the staff came and said, "Sir, we're going to have to take you now? I'm like, where are you taking me? He said, we have to get you to the skiff. So
Atlanta's, of course, full of skiffs, as
yeah,
everybody
exactly.
knows, right? Very easy to find.
So we're driving, unlike DOD, the Commerce Department doesn't have a big sort of security apparatus. I and the Secretary had a driver in DC. Secretary had a security detail. I did not. So we hired drivers wherever we went. And we had this Eastern European national who was working in the US as a driver. It's a little bit, I don't know how it happened, but we're driving to the skiff at the FBI building, and he pulls up in this Eastern European accent to the gate, and starts talking to the security person at the FBI building, and it is now, I don't know, 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock, so there's no one around, and the FBI thinks, they're pulling something on us. This can't be real, but so I had to have the White House call. The Eastern European national did not go into the building, so no worries about that. He sat outside. But so I hurry into the skiff, and the skiff isn't fully equipped. It just doesn't have the same level of security that we needed. Luckily, I had a device that I carried with me, so I was able to call in the skiff with that secure device at the appropriate level to participate in the meeting. And you're listening to what's actually happening moment by moment that it felt like the movies. It's the one major time that it really felt like you're playing out, because I'm hearing what the military briefers are telling the president about what's happening. The next day, it was literally the next morning, I had to go to another skiff. We actually found a better skiff at the Centers for Disease Control. And I walk in and sit down, and arrayed around the sit room, you see all of the cabinet members, and the president walks in, and I'm the only person who's on VTC, video conference. And so it was sort of awe-inspiring that there's the President of the United States, and I know what the sit room is like, and there's sort of TVs all around. There's one right up in front of him. He sees all of the cabinet there, and I'm sitting right in front of him at the end of the sit room, and he says, "Hey, Don, I'm glad you're able to join us." It's sort of surreal. The president and I have been friends for a while, but surreal to be in this situation where you have this international emergency, and the president still sees his friend and wants to say hi to his friend Don just before the meeting gets started. So it was an interesting experience.
We're going to move on after this question to Q&A for folks in the audience, but I wanted to spend maybe just a quick moment on leadership, thoughts on leadership. You obviously served in a remarkable role in an executive department. Is any, for folks in the audience, any sort of lessons or cautions or advice or things that you picked up along the way you felt have been particularly helpful for you or unhelpful for you?
Let me start with a sort of personal reflection. You were meant to be in the room, in whichever room you're in. You are meant to be there. You are talented, you're smart, you're capable. There's a reason that you're here at the War College. People have seen that you've been able to perform over time. I had imposter syndrome. I continue to have imposter syndrome. I go into meetings and I feel like, should I be here? Yes, you should be there. The things that you say, they're not stupid. The questions that you ask are important questions. Just because you don't know all of the details, you don't have all the expertise, doesn't mean that that you shouldn't be there. That also means that if you ask a question that, doesn't come off the way that you want, or you say something that doesn't land the way that you'd like, let it roll off your back, because you're going to have to get right back up on that horse and do it again in the next meeting, and you can't let that affect you. And that took a really long time for me to be comfortable with, the self-reflection and confidence that I deserve to be there, I should be there, I'm just as capable as anyone else in the room, and the things that I say are useful. The second thing I learned from Joe Biden, and I've worked with some really fantastic leaders, folks like Tim Geithner, who the mantra at Treasury was no peacocks, no jerks, no whiners, which is a mantra that I still live by. But I was with then Vice President Biden. It happened that it was leading up to a midterm election, and we were traveling around the world around the country doing campaign events. And my wife and I made a mistake. Really, I made a mistake. I didn't communicate effectively as to when I was going to be traveling. My youngest birthday it's almost always like a day or two around the election, the Tuesday, first Tuesday in November election. And so this was the case that particular year. And I had thought that I had communicated that we should do the birthday party with all of the kids and friends the weekend after. And my wife scheduled it for the weekend before, which we're out on the road campaigning, leading up. It's a Sunday before the election. So the event is over, and the vice president is shaking hands, and anyone who knows Joe Biden knows that he is going to talk with every single person who wants to wait in line and take pictures and call their sisters or moms or whoever. And so I go off and FaceTime. It was the early days of FaceTiming. So I FaceTime with my wife so that I can be at the party, basically, and I can take part in the singing of Happy Birthday. And I get emotional about this, and I'll astounding what happened. I'm singing Happy Birthday with everybody at the party on FaceTime, and the Vice President of the United States walks out, and he sees what's happening, and he comes over, he waits until after I'm done singing Happy Birthday, and he says, "Don, give me that." And he takes my phone, and he says, "Cam, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it was your birthday. I am so sorry. I cannot believe this. I'm so sorry. Your dad should be with you. We're about to get on the plane and come home. I will make it up to you. I will absolutely make it up to you, but I'm so sorry." And he gives me back the phone. He says, "And Don, get in the car," like he's angry. So I say, "Okay, sweetie, I'll see you in a little bit." And I get in the limo to ride back to the airport with him. And he gets emotional. And I thought, like, what have I've done something wrong. He's angry with me. And he says, "Don, I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. I should have told you this. For my 40 years in my career, including in the Senate, I had a rule. And I've been remiss in making sure that everyone knows about this rule. But if you have a birthday, an anniversary, a bar mitzvah, a recital, a concert, whatever the case may be, the big game, your obligation is to your family first. And if I find out that you have missed whatever that event is, you're fired on the spot." And he was deadly serious about it. So, we get to the plane and fly back. The very next day, it's a Monday, so it's the day before the election, he sends out a memo to the entire staff that basically says, and you can Google it to see, he sends out a memo that was leaked saying the same thing. The lawyers made him change it from "you'll be fired on the spot" to "you'll be very disappointed," or "I'll be very disappointed," or something like that. But for me, it was a reflection of his values. He recognized that this is a point in time, and yes, these are important things that we're working on, whether or not it's in the sit room, but he could get help from other people. Your family only has you. Your friends only have you. And you lose that time with your family, with your kids, if you don't take advantage of it. That moment is gone. You can't capture it again. So for me, that's the type of leadership that I would go to the ends of the earth for. That's how we should be as a society. That's how we should be as leaders, recognizing that family comes first. These other things, don't sweat the pressures. Yeah, they're important. Yeah, you have to feed your family. Yeah, you have to do things to protect our national security. But those moments in time with your family are going to be gone way too soon. So make sure that you enjoy that time and take advantage of it. And remember that they come first. Friends and family come first. And the things that we do in our career are very important, but they're careers. And there are other people who can step up for us when we need that help. So also turn to your colleagues, your partners, and rely on them just as much as they rely on you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Sadly, we'll have to wrap up. I did want to do one thing before we say thank you to Deputy Secretary Graves. I wanted to present you with the core text of the Foreign Policy Analysis subcourse. I know you have lived through so much policy, but very respectfully, if you really want to know why you did the things that you did, well, you can learn it all right here.
There we go.
In this core text, which I actually had while I was at the Commerce Department. This was on my desk for 2 years.
So now we know that the decisive decade, Commerce Department's national security strategy that he put together really is probably just coming out of this.
It's whole circle, right? So thank you so much. Here you go. This is a signed copy. I don't know if could we get a picture of Deputy Secretary Graves
Thank
with
you.
a signed copy. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if we could, well, you all are dismissed, and we'll see you in class. Thank you.
Thank you.